So Friday Friend Day is the 6th day of a creative cycle. And when we look at Ascension, it's indigo, which is insight. And number 6 looks like a pregnant woman. And I use the word woman because it's the one with the womb. So, Friday is a day to harvest the week. And vibrational medicine is easily understood when we understand that the flow of light moving from the inside out in the body can be felt by anyone who has eyes to see, ears to hear, a nose to smell, a mouth to taste, and hands to be able to feel the textures, the skin. So as we begin to come back into common sense as alchemists, we are going to be integrating the root cause of a trigger inside the intentional field. And so we've been sharing what it's like to co-create as twins by talking about the one pulsation of electromagnetism moving through every single autonomic nervous system. And how do we feel the autonomic nervous system? Well, it's in the spine. It's wired right in the middle of your spine. This is how nerves work. And so to come to your senses, we actually have to open up pathways of light, and there's only one journey. And that journey is up through the center of your spine. Okay? And so many of you that have been working in the field of trauma understand that the root cause of all addiction is shame. Okay? Well known. We know that shame is a sense of being out of place, tainted. And it is the first emotion that develops when an individual is in shock. An electromagnetic shock leads to a state of amnesia. And the collective conscious mind right now is unconscious. They're in opinion, perspective, belief system. And beyond the field of belief, in here is this electromagnetic divining rod. Okay? And so we know that when we look at the multidimensional world, that we can go into the history of medicine. We can go into the feeling state. And that's where we start to speak 5 senses. Because common sense is what everybody's sensing. It's not, oh, I perceive it this way and you perceive it this way. That's head language. And it's a symptom of duality, which means lack of maturity. And there's no one that's at fault here. Okay? The belief in fault and dual language is a divided mind. And so shame is connected to what miasm? What's the medical term for shame? Serenum. And what factors develop with serenum? Well, it's connected to the fall of consciousness, the fall of mankind. And so what happens when a man starts descending, or a woman, anyone that's in a light body? How is a light body, which would be 5 elements, how do we see the 5 elements through a rainbow, right? And if you look at a rainbow, it's falling water, right? And you have the factor of air and light. And what we see is an upside down rainbow. Start noticing. It's an upside down rainbow in the sky, which is a big key for us to understand why the human chakra system is drawn upside down, like upside down water. Why? These little riddles can be answered through patient education information, which will help people in family systems to begin to see that? That's not how you see a rainbow falling from the sky. It's actually like this. The red will be, yeah. And so when we look at nature, we begin to realize that the so-called left spin relative to seeing if someone is testable or not when you're doing kinesiology or German models of diagnostics. There's always a flow system that's related to the autonomic nervous system, and people are in left spin, which means that they're in a state of amnesia right now. And we've got the cosmic clock information that brings everything together, which is what Unified Medicine Institute is. It's actually the crystalline codex, which allows you to focus on the physical body, or to go into the genetic matrix, or to go into the spin of atoms and electrons behind that, and be able to even time travel, to go in and see when was the seat of the trauma. All right, and so once there's shame, it throws the adrenal glands off. And so a person will stop paying attention to the inner rhythm and they shift to outside in. And when that happens, we're out of attunement with estrogen and progesterone. And it's why we've had these substitute things in place like Roe versus Wade. It's because the electromagnetic spine has not been activated yet. And this happens every time we get to a certain part of it, almost 26,000 year ascension cycle. Happens every time. And so when we look at the fractal of Aquarius, we're talking about the planet Uranus. We're talking about the number 11. Okay? And we're also talking about the shins. Okay? And so when we look at the shins, we can think of the number 2, which is connected to the second nerve plexus center. And if we go all the way into the spine, that's where the L5 is. And the L5 is where the spine connects to the sacrum. And so to actually light the Holy Grail, to pull the sword from the stone, to actually let the Kundalini awaken, which it's already awakened in children. When the thymus gland shrivels, we have to open up the flow from the feet up and let this become full of light again so that the thyroid comes back online. Okay? And from there, we can open up the pineal gland, which is what everybody's thinking that you do. But Ascension is actually letting the heat rise all the way up from your feet because you've read the codex and you know your purpose, because the numbers don't lie. And so the second miasm, which is associated with, first it's shame is, oh God, me. And then blame is, ooh, whose fault is it, right? And that's the adrenal glands. okay? And in order to bring those back online, we simply need to bring the next level of education about the circadian clock. You can take a picture of this, and if you would like us to record more about this, it's pretty simple, but it has to be applied. It's like there's no way that you would understand the dashboard on an airplane unless you actually put hours into the cockpit. All right? You have to feel it from the inside out, which means you can't think about learning as being understanding when you haven't applied the principles. The only way to truly understand something is to stand in it, day in, day out, day in, day out. And so as we alchemize the shadow from the inside out, this is going to require people, I'm trying to keep this under 15 minutes, people to begin to become more than skin deep, which means you're not trying to figure out who you are at the age of 2 because the rest of the world is. No, you've got parents that actually understand how to hold the second womb. And they understand that because they've actually integrated their own genetic mutations, which are related to ancestral trauma. But instead of going into all that, or instead of using medication of any type, now what we have is the crystalline codex, which means this brings everything together relative to the Embry family, because my bloodline actually comes from Glastonbury, which is the seat of the King Arthur games. All right, my dad's name's Merlin, my grandfather's name is Merlin, and my grandfather had an out-of-body experience when he was under the care of an anesthesiologist who was using laughing gas. And next thing you knew, he was having all these visions about future events. And this was before we were born. And so it got passed on through our bloodline. And you will often see these incredible gifts that people have that are on beyond intuition. It's actually feeling the torsion field and trusting all things in moderation and being able to bring revelation from the inside out. It takes 3 sisters born in the mystic months of March to activate the Merlin code, which is the crystalline codex, which is connected to the Lord of the Rings. Okay, that's a tensor field. And if you understand about a Tesla Faraday cage, that's actually what we're setting up in this urban clinic here by using the rings. This is a sword. People call it a coil, but this thing right here is a sword. And if you flip this over, so if I use it on my body, there's an actual field around this. And you won't be able to feel it until you have your own personal experience. And to do that is first opening your spine to the intentional field so that you can take copper rods. Why copper? Copper is the element associated with the body's water, the flow system, right? It's the kidneys, the bladder, and the reproductive organs, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, in order to activate the solar plexus, which is where we turn base metals into light, right? And light into base metals, because the skin is the metal element, isn't it? Unless you go to India, and there it's the, it has to do with the ether. And so my grandfather, Merlin, so the Merlin code is actually understanding these 2 shapes, sperm, ovum. This is the intentional field. This has to do with the spine. And everybody has the male element right here, the scepter. Everybody has gonads. You've got an outie or an innie, and the 2 fit together. And so if you're in guilt tripping in your family, that's a solar plexus symptom. And it's related to the third STD. On top of that, that's where the thymus gland shrivels and everything becomes about compete, compete, compete. All right? So to let the human hologram integrate, some of you that are biblical, and you know, everybody in the United States understands the principles of light because it's what it's all based in. This is the autonomic nervous system. All right? And so we have the crystalline codex, and it has come through my willingness to take my older sister's patterns in. Oh, shoot, this one's over 15. Let's see if I can post it to Reels. The crystalline codex waits, and today is 8-5, okay, 8-5. That's the pericardium and the thyroid. And if that's your legacy code, Diane and Stephen, you're on the hot seat.